Okay, so welcome to Jaclyn Broadbent from Deakin, who's going to tell us about assessment and feedback design at scale, which is of great interest to us in learning analytics. Thank you.
Good morning. I really enjoyed yesterday, everyone. And sorry, I didn't actually contribute to any of the discussions, but I was sitting in and listening to the presentations in the afternoon. And ironically, what I was doing yesterday was releasing feedback and grades to some very high achieving honours students in psychology, which, you know, for anyone that releases grades to large amounts of students, sometimes it's a bit of a fearful endeavour. Particularly for us with psychology, we have honours is the only pathway to become a psychologist, which is highly competitive. I think we're like the second largest school for honours in Australia, with Monash Online, the GDPA being first. So we have like 330 students doing honours that are hypersensitive to feedback and grades. So that's what I was doing yesterday, but I was listening to all of your presentations, and hopefully I can draw on some of the threads that were discussed, particularly this idea of giving feedback and doing assessment at scale. So for me, the things that I'm going to touch on today are really about getting students to understand getting them to have a better understanding of standards, having scaffolded assessment, high quality audio feedback with feed-forward aspects, and how we ensure quality at scale. And also, on a kind of unrelated but connected note, this idea of intelligent agents, which are completely automated and essentially exactly the same idea as On Track, which is the presentation later this afternoon. So I just want to set the context of this unit. I taught into this unit I was unit chair for this unit for 10 years, but I actually taught into it for about 13 years. So it's a really large first year unit. We get about 1,500 students in one trimester take it. I think the highest we ever had was nearly 1,800. We're spread across 4 different campuses, including the cloud, what we call the cloud campus, which is online. Students come from a range of backgrounds, so they're from all different courses across the university. It's a health psychology unit, so it's one of those units that students are just kind of interested in and take as an elective. Because of its size, we have a lot of sessional staff, usually about 25, but could be over 30 in some trimesters, just depending on how it works out. So for us, I just thought I would put together a list of some of the assessment challenges that we have. And these are really important to consider in large classes, and also when thinking about automating any type of feedback. So our challenges were, obviously, we have a lot of students. We had reduced face-to-face time, particularly for the online learners, but really they were getting 1 hour seminars a week, and we had 1 lecture a week. The seminars were not compulsory, so some students were just listening to recordings and not coming at all. We completely relied on sessional staff for everything. There was only 2 of us in this team, like 2 academics. The rest were all sessional staff. We had to ensure consistency across all the groups. We wanted to be able to give students what we considered high quality feedback, and it to be individualized to their assessment, while also trying to take into account some, I guess, formative aspects of feedback. And this was really important to us, that we wanted to be able to do something that would be really helpful to the student, where they could improve over time. But we did have budgetary constraints, so it meant that we had to kind of make some choices about formative and summative assessment. And also, lastly, for us, remarking was a really big consideration. If you think about, we have 1,500 students, there are 3 assessments in this unit. If 10% of the students ask for a remark, that's 150 assignments each time, or 450 assignments that need to be remarked by me or Mel. So there's only 2 of us. So even if that was 5%, that's still too high. So for us, an end goal was really getting students to understand why they got the feedback, what the feedback meant, and we were okay if they didn't like the feedback, i.e. they didn't like their grade, but as long as they understood why they got it, we thought that would help to reduce the remarks. And this kind of touches on something that Margaret was talking about yesterday, that there's always going to be negative emotions associated with feedback, and we're probably not going to be able to get away with like having no student ever be unhappy. So we were really concentrating on what I would call negative achievement emotions, which is slightly different than just negative emotions, because some negative emotions actually spur the student on to do better next time. So this is kind of what it looks like, the whole map of what we did in terms of the feedback practices in this unit. I don't expect you to look at all of this in detail right now. I'm just going to drill into little pieces of it as I go through. But I guess from what was discussed yesterday, something that both Michael and Dave pointed out was there is no silver bullet, as Michael would say, or there's no one approach or one element. And I guess that's why I wanted to put this all together onto one slide, to say there are multiple elements that make this feedback practice in this unit work. It is, yes, the actual feedback that students receive. So these components are really important, but actually it's all the pieces put together that made those components work. And kind of sitting underneath all of this for me is the relationship building and the humanness of the whole experience. And I think that's something really important to draw on when thinking about automating feedback, like how do you get that across to the students? So the first component, let me just like get rid of that, is about scaffolding the assessment. So this is what our assessment looks like. We had 3 health behaviour journals. So students were engaging in a health behaviour change over time. And we decided to map out the types of skills that we wanted students to learn. And this is, as Dave was talking about yesterday, having that we don't do this very often in higher education, where we're looking for ways to build upon the same skill set. That's exactly what we were trying to do here, but with summative assessment. So what we actually planned out were 3 assessments that really built in challenge level as it went along. And we also removed support as it went along. So you'll see in the first journal post, they do all the activities they need to do in class. It's highly supported and structured for the student. And by the time they're doing the last journal post, we're only doing 1/3 of the activities in class, and they're left to do 2/3 of the activities by themselves. They're also getting progressively harder as we go along. But essentially, the students do a 2-minute video about their behaviour change, and then they have this written component. And we had mapped out the skills for each part. So even though each journal is different, the skill sets underlying each one are very similar. So we were able to construct feedback that really targeted those underlying skills that were the same. The students also got a very detailed rubric, very, very detailed. So I would say, that would be another piece of feedback information. We did videos. Every single tutor, when they were marking an assessment, recorded a video. Now, for us, we did this because we were doing audio feedback for all of the feedback given to students. So we wanted them to have a face to their name and the voice that they were hearing. So most tutors, what they would do is make one generic video that they would upload to all of their students. And this generic video they usually made kind of after they had finished marking, and it would be a, hi, this is what I look like, remember me. But also these are the kind of common mistakes that happened across assessments that I was marking. I won't kind of touch on that anymore because that is quite generic, I guess, not personalized to the individual. And the last component was this audio feedback, which is about 5 minutes. So we did not write on the students' work at all. We did not correct grammar, spelling, that kind of thing. For me, that was not important. What we really wanted to touch on were those underlying skills that we were trying to develop with the students. So another important element for understanding feedback, we felt, was getting students to understand the notion of quality. And this kind of, Michael touched on this yesterday, this idea of evaluative judgment. Very important for us. We felt that if we could get the students to understand what the feedback was, how the standards were being applied, then when we gave feedback, they would be able to use it more readily. So every semester, the way we decided to do getting them to understand standards was I did a health behaviour change alongside the students, recorded my progress in an online journal, and did exactly the same assessment that they were doing with them, working a little bit ahead of time. So in this particular instance I'm showing a picture of here, I was going to yoga class twice a week as my kind of overarching goal, but pretty much I was becoming the healthiest person on live working in this unit because I had done like every single behavior change. And what was important aspects of this just was that I did it with them, and then I would record myself applying the rubric to my own piece of work, and I would talk the students through in a video about how the rubric was applied, why I'd lost marks in a particular place, or why I had gained marks, what made my piece of work good. And so that was shared. It's a really well used resource. So on average, we'd get about 8,000 views by the students who, so obviously they were coming back to it multiple times to understand like how to create their own assessment piece similar to this and understand how the rubric was going to be applied to their piece of work. Importantly, like the actual assessment, we scaffolded, so reduced the amount of structure in my journal and removed it. So while I always went through the standards, what I would do by the third journal is have quite heavily redacted parts of my my assessment piece so that they had to kind of, they couldn't just, I wasn't just giving them every single bit of the assignment. So really the important part is this part here, which is the audio feedback. So we gave about 5 minutes of audio feedback to students for each assessment piece. And the really important component, I would say, would be these parts here that we built in, this feed-forward feedback. So what we did was we trained tutors, so they would give 5 minutes of feedback and that would talk about their current performance, but also each tutor was required to give at least 2 pieces of what we were calling feed-forward feedback. So that is taking the students' current performance, what they had done in that journal, and then using it to guide them in their next assessment piece. So because we'd spent all that time mapping out the skill sets for the students, we knew what questions overlapped, where they would be, while they might be doing a different concept or model or something, the actual understanding of what we were asking them to do was really just the same in the next journal. And that's what the tutors would concentrate on, is giving that really personalized, see how what you did here. To do this better in the next journal, you need to do X, Y, and Z. And I think that the feedback that we got was that students found this really valuable. You know, there was lots of discussion yesterday about how we give feedback and then students like walk away out of their unit and never kind of know how to use that feedback again. Or they're not asked to use it again within the same unit and often don't understand how it would apply to some different but similar assessment in a different unit in future. So I don't want to tell a room full of experts about feedback, how to suck eggs, but these are kind of the important elements that I consider were the most helpful to students. And I guess underlying this, all of these things within the audio feedback, again, is this humanness. And I know Michael does so much audio and video feedback, and maybe he can talk to this later as well. But the audio feedback it cannot be anything else but personalized to that student, really. When you're talking to the student about their piece of work, you're not copying and pasting, you're not using quick marks from Turnitin, you are talking to the student about their piece of work, drawing out examples of their piece of work. And I think that's the part that the students liked the most, that they felt, you know, connected with their tutor who was talking about their work. Often our tutors would start with kind of an interpersonal communication. They were marking the same assessments over time, and they also were most often teaching them in class. So they were able to say, you know, oh, hi, how did it go on the weekend when this happened? Or, you know, last week you talked about this in your journal, what are you doing this week? And I think that that is really important. we didn't move to audio feedback until about 2 years into being, I had been unit chair. And so there was before that, maybe 5 years before that, we were doing written comments. And that, one of the reasons I moved to audio feedback was because written comments, the tutors would often just copy and paste the same comment to every single student. They had a cheat sheet, and I get why they did that. And I used to do that too. And as a sessional staff member, you had a set of comments that you sent to everybody because it was much more efficient to do it that way. But it's not personalized at all. And students, what they sometimes, especially the low achieving students, they don't know how to transfer that generic comment to their specific piece of work, because if they understood that, they would have done the piece of work better to begin with. They would have, if they understood what was missing or what was wrong, they would have done something to improve it. And I think that is the component that I worry the most about when things are automated and very generic, about whether those lower achieving students will be able to transfer the knowledge across to and apply it to their piece of assessment with a real understanding of how they need to improve. So we would give about 4,000 audio files over the course of the trimester, so quite a lot. So really underlying, making sure that that all worked, was this idea of also improving the evaluative judgment or the notion of quality of our actual tutors giving the feedback. And this was a really huge component. We had, over 25 people marking in this unit, and we needed them all to be marking exactly the same. So I won't go into much detail about how to do this, except for that we just applied the exact same process that we were applying to students to the markers. So we were giving them exemplars of like how to apply the standards and what the feedback would look like. We then let them do some marking. We listened to their feedback. Then we gave them audio feedback on their feedback using feed forward aspects to it. So exactly what they were doing with the students, we were doing to them. And that's how we helped them to improve their quality overall. They also could see what other markers were doing, and they could reference themselves against other markers to see how they were progressing, which was important. So this is just some of the Evaluate data, our student evaluation data. And obviously not all of it is important, but I guess just highlighting this column, the feedback on my work helps me achieve the learning outcomes. So you can see that we were consistently scoring very high. And I didn't even cheat because we have 2 other semesters each year that have really low student numbers. I only put the large student numbers in here. You can see we were scoring like, 94, 95% agree or strongly agree that the feedback was really helpful. So just to dig into that feedback question and to show you the timeline is, we started in 2011 just going from written feedback, which was a lot more generic copy and paste, to audio feedback. And you can see there was a really big jump in how satisfied students were. And then in 2014, we introduced these feed forward aspects, and again, maintained like a high student satisfaction with the feedback after that change. We also just asked the students ourselves, and we got 85% agreed or strongly agreed that the audio feedback was more detailed than written feedback. And I would definitely say, having moderated thousands of assignments, that what you can say in 5 minutes is so much more than what you can type in 5 minutes. 93% agreed or strongly agreed that their tutor cared. 95% said that it felt more personalized. 92% said it helped them improve their next journal piece. So alongside that, so this is all very personalized and at scale, but alongside all of that, we have these things called intelligent agents, which is like On Track. It actually is part of our learning management system, which is by D12, Desire to Learn. And it's essentially what On Track is. It looks that I have this, it always makes me think of the Matrix, because they're called intelligent agents. They're not that intelligent. They just do exactly what you tell them to do. That is that they're looking for a particular criteria that you set, a behavior on the LMS that the students have done, and it could be anything. All the things that were mentioned yesterday, such as like related to grades, submitting an assignment, attendance, posting on a discussion board, not logging on to the LMS. It could there's like literally anything that is recorded on the LMS could be targeted, could be targeted. So we actually alongside had this automated system going with their assessment. And this part was completely, I guess, generic and automated. So what we would do is send out these emails, just like On Track. It can be personalized by the unit chair. Mine always have way too many exclamation marks and are always just a bit, happy, I guess, because that sort of suits my personality. And what I would say is the most crucial, important thing is that the kind of teacher presence comes out in this automated system. I cannot underline that anymore. Once it becomes so generic that it feels like it comes from the university, I think it loses some of what is important about it. So it needs to feel like it actually comes from the person and is their personality. So, we would send ones to students that got a high distinction, for instance, with like a quick message, a little stamp. If they got below 60%, they would get one that would say, all right, this is what we need to do to help you to get a better mark next time. Here's all the resources. We're running this special drop-in session for you. You can watch this recording. You can look at these slides. We always, of course, in any of these emails had an expectation that the students would be able to succeed, and we always scaffolded help-seeking behaviours because it was really important that if we reached out, they reached back to us. We also, one of my favourite ones was we targeted improvement of scores over time. And the reason why this was one of my favourite ones is because, you can send an email to say congratulations to someone that scored a HD. And they've obviously achieved really well. And you can send ones to people that haven't achieved and help to manage them to do better. But then there's this mid-tier of students who often kind of get ignored. And those mid-tier students might be doing the best work that they've ever done. It's just that their best work is not a HD. So this one is looking at, do they improve over time? And what it targeted was when a change in grade occurred, where the grade on the next assessment was higher than the original grade, they would get sent this. You would also see there's another stamp. We put GIFs, stamps, videos, all sorts of stuff. Again, that's relates to kind of my personality, but also about connecting. So these stamps, hopefully this is reminding you of something. For me, it was in primary school, when you did something well on a piece of work, you would get an elephant stamp, a good work stamp put on it. And that's what we were trying to achieve here. So we would get so many comments from students who were like, oh my God, I love the stamps. And when I first started doing it, I thought this could go either way. They might think this is super lame, or they might love it and have the same memory that I had. And 99% of the time, they had the same memory as I did and remembered getting stamps in primary school. And I think they did kind of think I was lame, but I think that made it better that they were like, oh, Jackie's so daggy, look what she's doing. So yeah, we had about 20 of these agents working at any one time in that unit alongside the assessment pieces. So we had a lot of things going on. We did survey the students. 49% said that it did motivate them to do well by getting one of these assignments, and 96% agreed or strongly agreed that it made them feel like the team cared about them. And this is a really important point because this is completely automated, right? I'm not writing hundreds of emails to students personally about their piece of work, and yet they really still felt 70% strongly agreed that they felt that they were cared about by getting an email. And we had some qualitative data. I've just put the themes out here because we've not got that much time, but I guess the stuff that I would really like to highlight from automated data is this idea of kind of increasing motivation, this idea of connectedness. And we got tons of comments that were about connecting not just to our team, but Deakin, which actually really surprised me. They were saying how much they felt they belonged, or, that kind of stuff. That it helped them to build confidence, was motivating. They saw it as a reward. And they just felt this idea of being special and individual. We had people writing us emails saying I sent, I'm so excited. I sent this email to my parents and to show them how well I'd done, that I got this email that someone was congratulating me. And this is an automated system, and yet we were still eliciting all of these responses. And lastly, I will just highlight the comments that were related to it not being authentic or system generated. There were, of course, students who in the comments would say, hey, you know what? I know that this is an automated system. And there was less than 10 students that did talk about this. And they either said that they didn't care, it was still really a positive experience for them, or they just went, hey, I know it's automated, but then went on to just like talk about something else. And so we assumed that it kind of had no effect on them, that they felt that it was automated. So just some examples of the types of things I was saying. It made me feel like a person studying and not a number in a large group. It made me really feel like the teaching team were there anytime we needed them and were keeping our eye on our progress. It truly motivated me to continue to pursue higher marks. I firstly couldn't believe that she had known, and secondly, couldn't believe she took the time to say congratulations. I really felt like it mattered how well I did, and I wasn't as isolated as I felt at university. I guess I pulled out these. I mean, of course, I could have just pulled out the best comments, but this is a good representation of the types of things that they were saying. And the important part here is, again, automated, but felt connected, and which I loved. So lastly, I guess I will leave on kind of 2 points. One, which I've just been kind of harping on about the whole time, which is this idea of connectedness and the humanness of the experience. To me, really important that that comes through. And I think it really helps to motivate students, regulate their learning, helps them to engage, and makes them, want to connect back with you. And I love that. And, I'm a very big believer that, when you're online learning, it's really a human endeavor and not just a technological one. The tools are amazing, but humanness needs to sit underneath it. And the last point is, I've got a picture of a dragon boat. I don't know if anyone does dragon boating. I've put this here because feedback is obviously the focus of these 2 days, and often just the focus of all kind of, academics when they're marking. But actually, feedback is just one element, and it's all those pieces put together that actually makes the feedback itself work. And the reason I have a dragon boat here is because dragon boating works only when all the components are working together, all of the people. It's not about one being strong, one team being stronger than the other. It's actually about the team that is going to be more likely to win is one that all the pieces work together at once and help to propel the boat forward. And so I think it's always really important to think about the design of the assessment piece, thinking about, all the components, how students understand what quality looks like and how they understand their feedback, as well as just what actual feedback they're getting. Thanks.